Hi everybody, day 12 for me on plan. I thought I'd do a video about some ways to distract yourself when a craving strikes. Some of them are science-based and some of them are some rather silly ways that work for me. So number 5, I'm going to count backwards, is do something physical. Now this works for me every time. I don't know why it works, I just know that it works. So when I get a craving, for me, it's because I love gardening, it is doing a bit of weeding. I do think that there is some science-based around this. It's to do with a different part of your brain taking over. I know it works when to do with pain control. If you Google Professor Moseley Lorimore, he's done some research to do with pain control and moving a different part of your body. So I suspect it's along the same sort of lines. A different pain pathway, a different part of your brain takes over the control of pain. So I suspect it's to do with something along those lines. But if you do something physical, so for me, weeding, knitting, crocheting, if you do some, if you're into crafts or colouring or art or anything like that, then that will work. It just stops the craving. This number 4 is a technique that I learned as part of some CBT therapy that I've been doing recently, to do with pain control again, for me, but again works along the same sort of principles. It's a technique called 5-4-3-2-1. So you think of 5 things, 4 things, 3 things, 2 things, 1 thing, and again it takes over, another part of your brain takes over. So you think of, say for instance, 5 different car makes, so Volvo, Ford, Mercedes, etc., and then 4, gosh, you can see where my brain's going, 4 types of cake, Battenberg, Victoria sponge cake, Eccles cake, 3 kitchen appliances, grater, whisk, etc. Then the number 3 is, now this is a rather silly technique that I use, and I call it Fred and Bob. So when I feel my cravings start to strike, so my tummy's grumbling away and groaning and mumbling, and I just feel that uncomfortable, oh, I'm a little bit hungry, I have put a positive spin on it, and I think of that as my tummy monsters. And it sounds utterly ridiculous, doesn't it? But I've given them names. They're Fred and Bob, and I think, oh, instead of it being a horrible, uncomfortable thing, I've flipped it to a really positive thing, and that is that my tummy monsters, who I've called Fred and Bob, they've woken up, and I literally go, oh, hi Fred, hi Bob, you've woken up. Great stuff. You must be hungry because you've just woken up from a snooze. So come on, get to work, start having your breakfast. And they are literally for breakfast eating my fat. And so I've got that positive spin on. They're awake and they're munching away on my fat. So there's the sort of positive spin on, and that distracts me from what is an uncomfortable thing. And then if I then go and do something physical, or I do a 5-4-3 or whatever, it just takes me away from the uncomfortableness of it. The number 2 is a breathing exercise. So the one I use is a technique which is 4-7-8. If you Google it, you'll find a load more information about it. You breathe in for the count of 4. You hold for the count of 7, and then you breathe out for the count of 8. It's based on the theory that, or science, again, it's science-based, that when you are getting anxious, and if you're getting a craving, then you're starting to think, oh God, am I going to give in? Am I going to break my diet? That you're in getting anxious, fight and flight mode kicks in. If you control your breathing and slow your breathing down, which this technique does, then you're going to stop yourself from getting anxious by slowing your breathing rate down, and that slows your heart rate down, and you pull yourself out of that fight and flight mode and into a much more calmer mode. That's what the breathing does. It's slowing your breathing down, and it pulls you into a much calmer and more rational way of thinking. there's another one which I think is called box breathing, which is, you can Google, there's loads of different sort of breathing exercises for controlling being anxious. They'll all do the same sort of thing. And then number one is another very silly technique. Again, it's just a silly way to distract yourself. So go to the loo, which sounds really weird, but just go to the loo and then have a wee or a poo and imagine that you are weeing out your fat as you're having a wee. And it's such a silly thing, isn't it? But it works every time for me, because then you're not going to want to go and eat something and add to that fat. So those are my top 5 tips for distracting yourself, motivating yourself a little bit too when a craving hits.